you're mirroring very much my experience of joining my first men's circle. And at that time, the actual men's circle was a block away from where I lived. And yet it still took me a while to get there. And it took me a while to show up, even though there was, for me, a very imminent need for that sort of community and that kind of support. What had happened was I was driving and I looked up on the side of a building, and I love retelling this story because it's one of these things. The sign is right there. And it was literally this sign on the side of the building that said support for men. And I had never seen anything like that before. I was so shocked. It's like, support for men? What are you talking about? Back then it was, you just didn't see that.
Into the fire, here we go. Into the fire, head to toe. Into the fire, to be seen. Into the fire, to be.
Hello, this is Mark A. Lewis. This is the Sacred Village podcast. Today we have a very good friend of mine. His name is Ross Tayler. He's joining us from the Nanaimo area. He moved there recently. He did live out in the Okanagan for about 4 years. Now, Ross is somebody who I consider to be very, very unique. His story is very unique. His path is very unique. And his soul is very unique. And many people know Ross. Many people would know him to say hello. He worked in Starbucks for many years prior to when I met him. When I met him, it was in the town of Squamish, and he was running a men's circle. And I had a calling to join this men's circle. And, it took me a while to get the courage to join the men's circle, to go out and take a look at what was happening. I remember driving down the highway after having visited some friends in Vancouver and returning to Squamish. And I was on the highway, and I was either turning left where I lived or turning right to the circle. And I just somehow decided in that moment it was time, and this energy, this heart opening came about for me, and I took a right and I went to the circle. It was outside. Ross was I could be mistaken, but I think Ross was the only one there. There may have been a couple of other men, but I do remember distinctly seeing Ross sitting on a log outside. The fire was going, and he looked over at me, and the look in his eyes was one of, I don't know, it was like, it's always nice to see a new man join a men's circle. It always feels good in the heart. It feels validating. It feels like expansive, as that circle grows. But there was something else there too, a look in his eye that I've seen many other times before when he looks at me. And I think there's just one of familiarity and one of friendship. So it was as though, and this speaks to the uniqueness that Ross carries, which is he is a highly intuitive human being. And if there was a part of him that knew that we would become very good friends at that moment, that wouldn't surprise me at all. So yeah, I went to that circle, and I think we jumped through the fire that night. If not that night, it wasn't long after that. There were some really good rituals, and a long-lasting friendship has emerged from that. And I do want to speak about those 3 years, as I've never spoken about this before, but I want to speak about the 2 or 3 years while I was in a challenging relationship, while knowing about the circle, why I never went. But I think I'd like to get into that with Ross after I introduce him. So without further ado, hello, Ross Tayler. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Mark. So happy to be here, and really appreciated that intro and the reminder of that first circle when we met. And I can actually picture it when you were talking about it, which was really great. I know exactly where it was, and I remember that time.
Yeah, it was very powerful. And I met many men either that night or the following week or the following week. I began after that circle. I certainly didn't go every circle, but I became a regular. I was there regularly. I would return over and over again. It was such an important part of the ecosystem for me there. My son, my two children, my two boys, they were going to the Waldorf school. My youngest, I'm not sure if he had started at that point. If not, he was close to beginning. And the Waldorf school certainly had community. And there were a couple of men at that Waldorf school who were going to your circle also. But that wasn't enough to kind of like, that wasn't it. That wasn't the pointer. That was more of like after sort of contemplating like why. I guess I didn't know them actually. Come to think of it, the men that were going to both the circle and had kids at the Waldorf school, I don't think I knew them. I think that's probably why. I mean, I knew them peripherally, probably to say hello, but I was very removed from the social world of Squamish. I would go to Vancouver to reconnect to friends sometimes, and I didn't know how to land in a community. Now I know how to land in a community. You figure out where the men's circle is, you figure out where the Waldorf school is or some other institution that's not really, that's aligned with your heart and your values. But particularly those circles of either men or women or communities of men and women where there's an aspect of ceremony. So, and I know you had a 7-year journey in your men's circle experience in Squamish before you moved out to the Okanagan. So I don't know if you want to speak about that. I'm going to leave the floor to you. Yeah.
I think the thing I want to start with is that you're mirroring very much my experience of joining my first men's circle, which was on the island back in 2013-ish. And at that time, the actual men's circle was a block away from where I lived. And yet it still took me a while to get there. And it took me a while to show up, even though there was, for me, a very imminent need for that sort of community and that kind of support. What had happened was I was actually in Duncan at the time. And I was driving down the road and I looked up on the side of a building, and I love retelling this story because it's one of these things. The sign is right there. And it was literally this sign on the side of the building that said support for men. And I had never seen anything like that before. I was so shocked. It's like, support for men? What are you talking about? Back then you just didn't see that. And what I love about that story especially is that was my invitation to start going to the men's group in Duncan. And the same person that was behind that sign ended up being the man running the circle in Vernon. So there was this neat full circle experience with that. And ultimately, after being on the island and returning to Squamish, I just felt this immediate call to start my own circle and to share this experience because it was so powerful, such a powerful form of healing and connection. And just by showing up, so much would shift. I didn't even have to dive into anything deep. Just being there consistently and having it be an anchor in my week was incredibly healing. And it just continued on for years. And to this day now, I have a circle that I've started here in Nanaimo.
Wow. So it's obviously an important part of your life. And it is for me too. As you know, I pulled together a circle in Enderby. There were 2 circles happening, Vernon and Salmon Arm, and we put the word out to both. And what I felt was missing was something that I needed, which was a circle for people who were more experienced with men's circles and were willing and interested to go a little bit deeper. And boy, we sure have. And you were a part of that circle for 6 months before you moved, and it was a very powerful. It was an experiment, but it was an informed experiment, and it's proving to be. It works. It works really, really well, and there will be a time where I'd like to open up the conversation about that circle that we started. I brought you on as a co-leader and another friend of ours. And another fellow who is a part of the Mankind Project. And so that's another, the Warrior Weekend, the Mankind Project. Those are experiences that you've had and experiences that I haven't had where my experiences have been different. But that collaboration, bringing together, that information. So before we go too far down that path, though, I want to go back to, those first 2 or 3 years for me. When I feel into that time, I do feel sadness around, not for me. I don't feel like I missed anything. Like I feel like I wasn't ready. But it was a sad time. There was a lot of aloneness. And so I do want other, it's a similar projection for my children. I don't want them to have to go through that. I want to encourage men who are struggling to find your men's circle. It's so helpful, but at the same time, everybody has this spiritual path that they're on, whether they like it or know it or not, in my opinion. And, but those, that time of reluctance to join something like that, what is your take on that? Why does it take men, and I think women also, but let's just speak about men. Why does it take men so long to get the courage to join something when they feel a nudge towards it?
That's a great question, and one that during my time in Vernon, because I wasn't facilitating the circle every week, I had the opportunity to kind of sit back and observe. And one of the things that I observed over that time was how scared men were when they did show up. And I think my belief around that is that a lot of the pain that we've experienced, or maybe I'll just say I have experienced, is that I experienced a lot of pain at the hands of men, a lot of judgment. I was bullied as a kid. I didn't have a lot of positive experiences with men. And so to show up at a circle that is supposed to be supportive and healing, when my body remembers all of the pain that I experienced because of men, it's kind of like this counterintuitive thing to do. So there's as much pull towards it as there is resistance towards it, which is, on the other side of that, there's so much healing that happens when you do show up. And I think that's what you're speaking about.
Yeah. Somehow having the courage and the willingness to be vulnerable, despite the fear, despite what's the reluctance, there are so many gifts on the other side of that threshold. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what that rite of passage that I don't actually remember if we jumped over the fire. There was some kind of a fire ritual that we did. And I remember I was a part of it, and I remember, men holding me back, this whole dance around. I can't, it's a bit foggy, but it took courage. It wasn't like, Mark, your turn. It was like, okay, who wants to do this? And for me, at that time, I really felt a draw to be vulnerable. I just had something in me that was like, it's time. So my hand went up and away we go. And that happened over and over again in your circle. Now, with that in mind, you decided to start a circle. Is there a part of you that feels, was it a step that you needed to do in order to be the leader of the circle, as opposed to step into a circle where other men would be leading, and then that vulnerability would come up for you? Or is it just, I don't think there are many circles in Squamish, but maybe you can answer that.
Yeah. I think I was driven very much by the experience that I had and how much I was changed by showing up at a men's circle and how powerful I witnessed it to be. And then the practical piece was that there was no one doing that in Squamish. And so I felt that I needed to be the one to offer that in Squamish. And so it was quite organic in that regard. But there was a point, I'm guessing it was probably like maybe the last couple years of the circle in Squamish. There was a point where I really claimed it as this is a big part of my purpose, and this is my stage, if you will. It's like I claimed the space. Let's put it that way. I claimed the space, and it became a very powerful part of my growth when I claimed that space for myself. And I think that's when I really stepped into a different layer of leadership, because of course it took leadership to start it. And I remember the first circle I had, I think men were leaning out more than they were leaning in. And really it was just, eventually it took hold, and a couple of men would keep coming back. And then it just built one man at a time. And it takes a lot of commitment to keep going when in those early days.
So is that, in these circles, we do different types of archetypal work. We work on the different aspects of self, the 4 quadrants that are very well known, or the warrior, lover, king, and magician. So while you were leading the circle, that would be, we would call that the king energy. And you would allow other men to step in and also be the king. And for me, that was an edge. I was drawn to do that, but it was difficult because I had a lot of wounding around not doing it right. and in my upbringing, and whether that's in the household or in the public school system. I feel like it was a big part of my my story, my imprint, of being seen as not doing it right. So from an outside perspective, not an internal perspective. And so that's where the big shifts are, that happened for me in ceremony and in circle, which is reorientating into a space of sovereignty, which I think is that what you're speaking about when you're saying there was a point where you began to really own the space? Is that a space in your heart where you actually felt worthy of being the leader of the circle? Yeah, could you speak to that?
Absolutely, because I think prior to that, there was a time when I was trying to diffuse that leadership, and you were a part of that leadership team in terms of having a few men that would facilitate so that the pressure could be taken off me. But really what I was trying to diffuse was my connection to my power. And so, the universe reflected back to me the lack of interest, and it just wasn't cohesive in terms of trying to diffuse that energy. And it just came back to like, okay, no, I need to claim this space. And that was me claiming my sovereignty.
Right. And is that claiming your self-worth? Like claiming like you deserve to be here, from the point of view of like reclaiming the energy of someone, of the gaze of another, determining whether you are worthy of one thing or another, and claiming that as your right to say, your choice to say if you're worthy in a position, in a role, in a way of life, in one way or another.
Yeah, it was very much about that. And there was other things going on at that time that in my outer world, outside of the circle, that were pushing me in that direction as well. And so, I think about the hero's journey. It was, I answered the call. I answered that call.
Yeah. And holy, like, okay, I like that you're going down this path here, because this is something that I contemplate, and, I have to contemplate it, because it's always, the journey never ends. It's not like you reach the obstacle, or you reach the objective, you get the happily ever after ending, and then, it's bliss from here on in. It doesn't work that way. And so, is the sustaining perspective, sustaining optimism, sustaining that willingness to get up and do your work. Like, how do you manage and contend and kind of confront and deal with the reality of existence through that lens?
That's a big question. I think for me, what drives me is this inherent need to understand and learn the human experience, learn about the human experience. I keep getting up every single day. And I think for me, it's about incremental change that happens. It's like I can reflect back and think to times when I literally wouldn't get out of bed and wouldn't meet the day because it was just too much to face. And so for me, it makes me think of purpose. Like, what is it that's driving me? And a big part of my purpose is to teach and to share my wisdom. And that's something that I've really just stepped into in this last, let's just call it a 7-year cycle. I think I'm year 6 in this current 7-year cycle. And that purpose to teach and share my wisdom is what drives me. But my wisdom comes from all of my lived experiences, everything that I've had to face and endure. I just think about all the times I've been brought to my knees by what shows up at different times on the journey.
Yeah. And somehow that's okay. And getting back up is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I just read a quote by Leo Tolstoy. I can't quote it because I don't have it in front of me, but the gist of it was somebody that's walking 1,000 miles to have the objective of reaching 25 miles per day, and to focus on that objective is how one gets through it. So you even mentioned like the 7-year cycle, and I can relate to that. I have an orientation around 4-year cycles and 11-year cycles, and that's part of charting the journey and not letting the entire, the landscape of the infinite, creep in, because it can be quite overwhelming. It can be overwhelming and it can also be a point of surrendering. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think every day I want to surrender to the infinite, every day, all the time. And so maybe just reflecting now, that using the use of numbers, the use of numerology is a way to have some humility and to take baby steps towards surrendering to the infinite, surrendering to God, or surrendering to our mortality, or whatever that massive, that existential abyss, that crisis that can be so overwhelming for people if they try to take in too much at one time. So yeah, the 7-year cycles, and then having our rituals, going to circle, and there's something so
Mm-hmm.
natural about men returning to a circle of men and just being amongst men. And I believe for women, the same is true, that it actually improves our relationships with each other. It helps create polarity. It helps create sort of a sense of, if there are differences between men and women, which I believe so clearly there are, we get to re-identify those and be okay with those and learn about those. So, you're 7 years in as a leader, and then you move to Vernon and you're joining the men's circle as a participant. And, you're grateful to be doing that, I remember. But can you speak to that transition?
It was a challenging one because I had claimed that space for myself for so long, and then to not have that level of control and join a circle that was established and following its own path, it was challenging for me. And I think the key word is control, because I think, control for me amounted to, at least what I came to learn, was control amounted to safety. And if I wasn't in control, could this be a safe space for me to do my work and continue to do my work? And so I think I went through, quite a rite of passage over the 4 years in Vernon. And yeah, and that was my experience to have. And it was a very beneficial one. And I think all of it prepared me to once again start up a circle here shortly after arriving. And, and part of that was the foundation that you helped me create through the 6-month experience before leaving.
Yes. Okay. So now you're moving on to the island, and you're sort of crafting something fresh, based on your 11 years of experience. 4 years in
Mm-hmm.
Vernon, 7 years in Squamish. Tell me if I'm getting the numbers wrong.
You're right.
Yeah. So that's pretty powerful. And for me, those numbers, 11, 7, 4, they're very powerful numbers. And I reflect on those, and they're useful tools for me as I reflect and see these patterns that for me are not coincidental. They're synchronistic, and they're meant to be helping me. So
Mm-hmm.
where are you at now, and what can you tell us about the new circle in Nanaimo?
Well, the new circle was very much informed by what I had observed over the 4 years in Vernon, as well as the closed circle that I co-facilitated with you over the last 6 months that I was in Vernon. And even the way that transpired, because I was on the fence about when I would be leaving Vernon, and this invitation was a sort of like, can I do this, or am I going to be leaving before it's over? Can I stay the whole 6 months? 6 months? And so it became this like mini rite of passage before going, which was really cool. I think you've often shared the phrase, which I think comes from the Blackfoot Elders, which is stay before you go. And it was kind of like that, stay before you go, because there's information that you need to gather before you go. And the circle that you created was very much that. And so how that informed me was, I saw over the 4 years, and this is not a judgment of anyone or anything. It's just, I saw more men leave or come once and leave. And I wondered about that. It's like, why are men showing up and not coming back? It kind of tags on to the why don't men show up in the first place? But, for men to show up and have the courage and have that first experience and then not come back, it's like, what's going on there? And so I think that informed me in terms of like, what kind of circle do I want to create that helps to alleviate some of what those stressors might be? And those stressors were a bit of a guess on my part. And then having the experience in that last 6 months of this closed group with a number of men that had committed to that closed group for a 6-month period, and then seeing the depth and the strength of that group build over time, that was absolutely something that I wanted to replicate in this Nanaimo group. And so that's kind of the main feature of it. Is it's a closed group, it's a specific commitment over a specific amount of time. There's a small contribution in terms of financial to, again, tether up that commitment. But I think the main thing is the safety that comes from seeing the same faces every circle, and the safety that comes from being able to share and learn and grow together. I wanted to say this earlier, so I'll just say it now. Like, one of the things that I've noticed the most is that as a man, I lived my life in isolation with blinders on, thinking I was the only one having the certain experience. And over this 11 years, I really noticed the most of men showing up and saying, oh, I've got this thing, I've had this experience, it's just weighing on me so heavily. And they think they're the only one having that experience. And yet when I ask or give a prompt, every single man in the circle will put his hand up and say, I've had that exact same experience. You're not alone, brother. And that, I think, is the most powerful piece of the circle, is that thinking that we're isolated, and we're not. We're not alone. Other people are having the same experience we are. And that's what I love. That's what drives me, is those kind of helping people with those kind of situations. And I think the other thing that shows up as a really big theme is the struggles in relationship. And when I say relationship, I'm not just talking about intimate relationships. I'm talking about every relationship. And these lifelong patterns that we play out in our relationships, that is a powerful piece of what shows up at the circle as well.
Yeah, we're all reflections for each other. I've been to circles with men and women with the same experience. As we show up and we share, everybody can relate to each other. And yet, with a men's circle, I think we get to go a little bit deeper into things that are specifically challenging for masculine energy. And especially that masculine energy. I mean, it's certainly going to have to do with identity. Like, it's things that are social, that are both cultural, the nature nurture. It's definitely both of those things. Who we are energetically as human beings, when you have that masculine essence, and testosterone and other things that are unique to the male. You pare back those layers, and you get a little bit deeper, and certainly you have something that transcends gender, that transcends skin color, that transcends all the things on those deeper layers. When you get into what's sacred, what you get into, the depths of the child wound, I'm not sure it's so different between man and woman. But while we're out here in this external, it's this 3D world, and the experiences that we're confronted with, like the tone of that, the texture of that, what's it like to live in a household with a feminine person? There are going to be women that will have that experience, and that's another discussion that I would love to have at some point, which is to like, how do you integrate the two aspects of being human when it comes to just the energy of masculine energy and feminine energy? There's many people that carry both, that are quite balanced. But I think most of us, while we're growing, while we're adulting, we're sort of on one side of the continuum or the other, somewhere on that continuum, not necessarily to the extreme edges of the continuum, but somewhere. And then those challenges that come up while our main teacher, whether it's somebody that we're in relationship who's feminine, or whether it's somebody that we're wanting to be with, that we're wanting to, help us connect to that feminine aspect, but through connection, like through human touch, like through a human experience that will eventually transcend that, which will eventually become transcendental and become more of a spiritual experience of connecting with our feminine within, and cultivating a balanced masculine feminine essence as we're getting into elderhood. That's what I see as the older we get, the closer we get to that naturally. But in the meantime, there's this distance between what we are and what we see and what we long to be with. Sexual attraction and intimacy, they're all part of this balance, this game of getting closer to God, ultimately, in my opinion, that wholeness, for that those things to come, that energy to come through us, which is, you get a
Mm-hmm.
yoga and Kundalini and all these things. But it's just a bit of a tangent there. But back to the circle, it was a closed circle, and there were a lot of men that were invited. But again, it was synchronistic. I had chosen a specific number of men to join, a specific number of leaders. I put the word out, and it filled up, and it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
There was no waiting list. It just filled up.
Yeah.
And that to me
And it
is
was
just
the
an
same
indication.
Same in Nanaimo.
Same in Nanaimo. Okay, yeah. So I don't even know if I want to touch that. It's so
I know, you don't need
beautiful. Yeah, it's like it's
Mhm.
powerful. Like
Mhm.
that's like those are signs. That's a really good indication that
Mhm.
that our hearts are leading the way, and it's not easy. Like the for me when starting that circle, the doubt that would creep in: is this the right time? Is anyone going to sign up? And then the silence, or for a particular period, and then one man, and then another, and it kind of slowly cobbles together as I'm sort of slowly letting go of my attachment to the outcome. It's like the two things are not. When you're on a spiritual path, you have to be prepared to feel some pain, because attachment is always connected, and on an individual level, to the actual outcome, is connected to a leader's healing. It's not separate. You can't control that shit. So
It's true. And, for me, what ended up happening was a close friend of mine, she reached out and said, "Hey, can I contribute some money towards a Facebook ad to help you start this group?" And that was the catalyst, like that invitation. And I just love the beauty of this invitation from the feminine to support this men's work. There was something special about that, and I think it was a little bit of fire that helped to fill it up, because being new to Nanaimo, I didn't really know anybody.
right. So another synchronicity, just a little tap on the shoulder
Yeah.
from the light workers that
Mm-hmm.
that we all are ultimately on some level. We could
Yeah.
open up that can of worms, and there's also people that are bringing in a lot of trauma, a lot of darkness, a lot of shadow. But the light and the dark, how they go hand in hand is that's, you can't have one without the other. So it's
true.
there's a balancing act here that we're all sort of a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder, can we just go back to, you just shared a little bit of I'll call it a monologue about the masculine and the feminine. And as you were speaking, I just this wave of emotion came over me, because I think you spoke to things that are so important to me and so alive for me right now, in terms of wanting to be in an intimate relationship and wanting to have that level of reflection, and this, I guess it's like this underlying belief that I need and want to be challenged by the feminine so that I can grow even more. And it's not to say that I can't get it in other ways, but it's there's something about that. And I know you know this, it's there's something about that level of teaching that can only come through that level of intimacy and safety. And it's both ways. I'm just it's been such a big part of my journey. When I look back at my pivotal moments, it was always at the ending of a relationship that a new chapter emerged. And I think that lines up now as well. It's I'm so wanting that level of connection and that level of growth. And it's visceral. As you were speaking about it, I was just oh my gosh, yes, please. It's so interesting. Yeah. I just wanted to speak to it because what you said was really beautiful.
Well, in my experience, for me, I'm going through some, I'm working on a project that is very challenging, and the outcome of which I thought I had an idea of what it would be, and it's not turning out to be that way. It's taking way longer. There's aspects of government policy and all of these things that require other people to get involved, and they take, they're working at their pace. I don't even know them, and so there's very little that I can do to encourage them. But it's affecting me. It's affecting, the financial stability of the family. It's affecting, there's energetic stuff that I carry that have to do with, several things, including we just lost our cat. So you know George.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, George has been missing for 4 days. And so we're the grieving process. It really, for me, it was a few days ago, being able to take some time and to feel into it. I was about 24 hours ahead of my family. So my son and the 12-year-old boy who was most connected to the cat and my partner. And so then they were, the grieving was really happening yesterday. And so these things, they enter into our nervous systems and they all kind of create this little bit of a soup. And, I don't really know how death sort of fits into that. I believe it does, but it's above my pay grade to really speak to that, because it's, when people lose something, they don't really want to hear that it's for the higher good. But it is on some level. And again, it's, the nuance of that is above my pay grade. So I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Fair enough.
But in terms of this project and the unknown and the finish line being pushed back and pushed back, I can see it, it's there. And then it's like pushed back out of sight again. And I don't even know where it is anymore. It's like, oh my God. But I do feel like, there's more within me that needs to surrender. That's my point. There's more digging. There's more, sort of like excavating, like the archaeologist, like just digging around the bones of whatever prehistoric creature is buried in that soil, and what are we unearthing? What are we excavating? We're excavating a story, and it may be a story that's already been told, that we're going through again energetically for a divine reason that again would be out of my pay grade. But, I think, but that's helpful for me. These are insights that I've had during ceremony, which have come from teachers, unseen teachers, spiritual teachers, that, and I don't know the accuracy of it in terms of how I'm comprehending the teaching, but it's working for me in this human body, this human mind, this human realm, which is to say that we have been here before. There is something, infinity isn't a straight line. Infinity is circular. We can't see that. It's like not being able to see that the earth is round. For all, I'm sure there'll be flat, as there are with flat earthers, there'll be flat universers and flat infiniteers, or, whatever that, those terms might be that don't exist yet. But, there is the infinity circular. And so for me, that there's comfort in that. It's like, okay, I've been here before. I can do this again. And then, there's the option to check out. People commit suicide. I've had 2 close friends that have taken their own lives, and it's been very difficult for the people that care about them, including me. But energetically, like they're not making any headway by doing that. But again, that's my human mind. I don't know. I can't say that for sure, but it does feel like it's unnecessary that you can do that work that you're doing once you've crossed over. You can do that work here. You can do that spiritual work here. Like there's no real point in taking your own life, because, we're handed this opportunity. And I think this speaks to what you were sharing earlier about, how you get up in the day, that, being able to chart that progress and stuff. I think what I see is that you're seeing that there's something bigger going on, a higher good, a soul, work that we're doing on a soul level that is meaningful. But it's also meaningful here on this realm.
It is.
So, I mean, yeah. And on that note, from men's work, what are we moving into? What's Ross Taylor's gift to the world these days?
I think it's continuing to evolve, but I think right now what's alive for me is, and it's also alive in my own life. It's this idea of helping people to reconcile their lifelong patterns, the things that you mentioned, that circle, the things that continue to circle back around. When I think about early days of my journey, like I would ask myself the question, it's like, why do I keep attracting the same person, the same situation, the same outcome? I unfortunately, we can spend a lot of time and many years repeating those patterns. And I think part of what gets me up keeps me going and gets me up in the morning is that I've continually worked on those layers after layer after layer. And yet there's still some that are so deep that it just takes a longer cycle to work with. But for me, like, it's an inside out job. And if we can look at those patterns, then we can create real change. And that's what I love doing right now, is really helping people with those kinds of inner conflicts of like, I've been having this struggle for so long and I'm done. I need to shift it. And it doesn't have to be forever. We don't have to be stuck in those patterns. We can actually change them. And once we do, it changes everything, because we are in this literal hall of mirrors. When we change what's going on inside that's creating that outside experience, then it can literally change in front of our eyes.
That's an interest. Okay, so there's a sort of a paradox here that I'm seeing, because on the one hand, there's, the work that I'm connected the most to, which is ceremony work, working with plant medicine and other forms of ceremony, where, just reaching that point of futility, not submitting to a more dominant human being, but surrendering to God and grieving, like giving up this emotion that we hold within us through our need for control in the external world, the pressures on our shoulders that we carry when we're parents, or when we're working in a particular job, or, the responsibility that we hold, and the past traumas that, the crosses that we, that we bear, that we, carry through the desert, and all that stuff. Like, it's letting go of that through emotional healing. And yet you have like Eckhart Tolle, who's on a park bench one day going through an experience that apparently was very deep for him and very, emotional. But then he's tapped on the shoulder, and one day it's just, he's illuminated, there's something that lights up for him, and he never goes back. And so then you get into the question, where I'm going with this is now we get into the work of the mind. How much does the mind have to do with it to transcend, those barriers, and how much of it is bypassing the emotional work? Are we leaving emotional work behind? But it seems to be a both and. So I don't know. What's your perspective on that when it comes to, identifying patterns, seeing that, becoming, awareness, when you work with, when I go to the jungle to work with the maestro there, when I come back, I realize that, the most powerful medicine is awareness, regardless of, the work that I've done on an emotional level, to delving into these dark corners of existence, being dragged across, there's desert sand, but then there's that once wet sand that's now dried and as hard as a rock, and being dragged along that. These experiences have they're gifts at the other end of these rites of passage. But when it comes to the mind and just seeing the patterns, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I love that question. So, for me, there's a recognition that we all are having a different experience with these patterns in terms of how they show up and when they reveal themselves. And, for me, it was like going through these different phases of life. And in this particular phase, I'm here sharing the wisdom of the first two phases, if you will. But in terms of awareness, and it's double-sided, because you mentioned the mind as well. And I think what I'm starting to realize is that, yes, we can have awareness, but our perspective can be completely off, because our mind is actually more in control than we realize. And it's timely, this question, because last night I was having a conversation in a group with someone that was sharing some Buddhist teachings. And as these Buddhist teachings were shared, I reflected back to my experiences with plant medicine and mushrooms. And I immediately realized that my perspective and my awareness around what was coming up in those journeys, I had it wrong. Like, I realized that what was trying to be reconciled was my mind and my thinking and the patterns of that span, this mental experience, rather than I was always trying to look at through the lens of this spiritual experience. And so it was actually rather big awareness last night. And so it's like I interpreted those experiences perhaps completely wrong, some of them, not all of them. And, I think that's what we're trying to reconcile. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that trying to navigate and straddle both of those truths is what makes this all so fascinating, but it also makes it so hard.
Totally. That's why the game Zelda is so popular. It's like
That's come up a couple times this week. That's funny.
really,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, you get like the mind. It's very tricky because you can get into these rooms, and your search and they can be massive with all sorts of labyrinths and gold and all of these things that ultimately have absolutely no consequence to that journey. So these loops, these cycles that can be created where something is trying to, our unconscious, our dream time, you get into Jungian analysis and dream interpretation. The symbolism and, the symbolism in movies that's so powerful. Like the symbolism is very real. There's an archetype with Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung.
Sure.
And, so there's a force that is supporting us, supporting our journey, but the tendency and sort of the susceptibility of human beings to get in these traps, for some of us, lifelong. Like some people will ignore them. And yet, so there's the mind, there's the trap, there's getting caught in these loops, these perspectives. That's a piece. And yet, when I see people that are caught in those for a lifetime, what I really see is somebody who's unwilling to feel certain feelings. So it's like, again, two sides of the same coin. Yeah, you have the mind and you have the body, you have the emotional experience, and then the mind is a really significant part of that human tool.
It is.
To get us through that maze.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And to circle back to men's work quickly, like the archetype in the magician is very much that energy of like living from the mind when we're in the shadows of the magician. So it's like that mental perspective of moving through the world rather than that heart perspective of living through the magic, right? So it's like it shows up there as well.
Yeah. There's more for us to mine here.
Sure is.
I think I can see future podcasts where we get right into those archetypes and give ourselves, a specific room to work in for 45 minutes and see what happens, because it's such an expansive landscape. Like there's so much to mine with each one of these aspects of self. And that's really what, the most beautiful part of a men's circle, whether you're calling in the directions or not. It really is about, and that's part and part, the directions, what that's about is acknowledging the aspects of wholeness, including the shadow, but to incorporate and to see and to become aware of all the aspects of self. So we're not living unconsciously. And we're living with acceptance of our whole self, and the beauty of that and the necessity of that. We're part of a reality. We're part of an ecosystem that, that needs all of these aspects, whether they're unconscious or not. But, there's definitely more to go on here. And, I feel like we've covered a lot of terrain. I will mention also, to the listeners that Ross is going to be, doing a side project for the Sacred Village, whether it's probably in a couple of weeks. What are you thinking, Ross? The Sacred Sunday offerings.
I'm thinking in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I've got some things that are shifting. So I'm like I said to you, but it's been tumbling in my mind and in my heart. And I do want to get started sooner than later.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll keep everybody posted on that. It's going to be an offering that happens on Sunday, and the general sort of vibe is something you can pour a cup of tea and get to know people out there who are doing interesting things, and that can be appreciated through auditory, through the podcast medium. There's a time where we have to start to expand into more of a village and community consciousness and community awareness and cultivating that. And that can happen, with the people next door, but it can also happen online in different ways. And, you live in Nanaimo, I'm in Enderby. If we lived anywhere else in the world, like in Europe or whatever, that would be somewhere you just maybe visited once in your life. For us, it's more often than that, but it's an 8-hour journey. So,
Sure.
But we can stay in touch this way, and we'll stay in touch in other ways too. But there's value there. Is there anything that you'd like to share in sort of closing before we sign off here?
Sure. I just want to tag on to what you said and just say that I just realized that, that energy you described at the beginning about how long it can take to show up the circle and to make that step. I think that's what I'm kind of going through with the Sacred Sundays. It's like, if I commit, then it's starting and it's not going to stop. And so it's like, I have
Yeah.
to commit, which is beautiful. So I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, it's an edge. Say similar for me, like leading up to starting this podcast. There were two sides to it. One is leading up to it and then committing and then finally, and doing it with a lot of, hesitation and also preparation. But then once it's started, the amount of commitment that's actually necessary is landing on a deeper level. So what have I signed up for? And
Totally.
it is sustainable, but there will be times where I'm just going to have to get up a little earlier in order to get all the things done for the day. My partner and I have a 5-month-old baby boy, and I have 2 other children that we share part-time with the responsibilities. They have separate two separate mothers out there in the world that they're with. Although the 19-year-old is on his own now, I should say. But yeah, it's there's a lot to do in a life, and to make things sustainable financially, and then to also make sure you have your time for your creative offerings. I can no longer put the time for my creative offering on the shelf until next month or the month after, or focus on it, 2 or 3 months of the year in the middle of winter when things are slow. I can't do that anymore. And that feels both liberating and also daunting. And the tension of which is sort of like, okay, well, that's sort of the tension of life that I'm carrying anyways. That comes in and out of my body as different chapters open up and different chapters close. And so, yeah, it is what it is. And I feel grateful to have had the nudge that was firm enough to get me moving on this path in this direction. So we're still kind of at the nudging stage for you, and we got it, 2 or 3 weeks. Well, as it sort of, it'll unfold when it needs to unfold. I think we can trust that.
It will.
Yeah. I'm really, and I don't want to, manipulate you in any way to kind of stay on board, but I am very grateful that it's you that I'm getting to work with in that capacity. And I really do look forward to that offering kind of taking on a life of its own. And I think it'll be good for a lot of people also. So.
And just to be clear, it's a full yes. There's no question around whether to do it or not. It's just
okay.
When to start it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah. It's wonderful.
And you had asked, like, what else am I doing? And I'll just let people know that I do counseling and coaching, and you can find anything you want to learn about me at my website. And the website is rosstayler.com, ROSSTAYLER.com.
Great. And we'll put that information up on our website and on the linked under the podcast, links under the podcast. And amazing. Thank you, Ross Tayler. Yeah.
Just so grateful that you've created this space, and I can't wait to watch it evolve and grow, and to see all the guests that you get to speak with, and just the direction it goes that you can't foresee. I think that's what's super exciting.
Oh yeah, totally. 100%. Yeah, I love that. You never know what's around the corner. Okay. Well, on that
So
note, yeah, thank you to the listeners out there. Thank you for tuning in and, taking a part of this, being a part of this journey. Any questions that you might have, you can send us an email, and there is more information on our website, sacredvillagepodcast.com. And I guess that's it for now. Have a beautiful day. Over and out.
I lay my head down.
Check out my lovely partner's music, Christina Jessen, at christinajessen.com. And there's also more information on what we're doing. We're doing a land project up here, traditional land development with a community intention. And if you're interested in any of the retreats that we're a part of and part of organizing, you can find all that information at sacredvillagepodcast.com. Have a wonderful day.
Floating down and down like a feather, I float. cafe.